Okay, thank you very much. If we can all settle down, because we have now a presentation from Mehmet, winner of the Azrael Morag Award, by the way, which I'm quite pleased to say that, on developing a simple collection viewer for the new Primo UI, so you can actually see a customer development on the new Primo UI straight away as well. So looking forward to it.
Hello, so I'm Mehmet Selik. If you want to follow along with my slides, QR code, URL, or just use your human eye interface to watch the big screen. I had a holiday in August, and we had a meeting with Guy Noam Ohad, and he said, "Well, I have a challenge for you." He asked me if it would be possible to implement a demo-wise widget for the new UI. So, and I was already thinking of implementing something, and we have this this images widget thing. We get the data from a museum, and everything is loaded up into Primo, so searches are happening in Primo. The thumbnails are linked to the museum catalog, the big screen, the big image is also from the museum catalog. And that's what I wanted to try to duplicate in the new UI. So I wanted to convert an existing jQuery Primo widget into an Angular.JS component for the new UI. So what does it do? What are the requirements? It only needs to show in one view because we only use it for one specific view. And I should be able to search in Primo for a special marker called collectie documentatie, and it's stored in the LSR04 tag. When I find this document, so in the alt UI, I'm just creating a new tab called images. And when somebody clicks on this images tab, I start searching for another identifier called M+. M+ is the museum system, plus the record ID of the host record. And I'll search all LSR05 tags for this. And when I get back a result, I parse it, extract the title, backlink, link to resource, and thumbnail stuff. We saw in Noam's presentation, so I don't have to explain those things anymore. And then at the end, the result is rendered in the details screen. So problem number one, only show in one specific view. Very easy. It just works out of the box. I like that. So step number two was also easy. I just have to search for an existing marker. And as Ulrich and Noam already showed, that's relatively easy. You can just get the record ID from the PNX in the parent controller. And you can also search if there is an LSR04 element in there and test if it has this collectie documentatie tag. So nothing very important there. Everything works as it should. So I must say, our implementation is from before the new collection feature was available in Primo, so we had to invent a lot of stuff. So that's why we have an LSR04 and LSR05 elements in there, but it can be easily ported. The new thing works comparable. So now actually the fun really starts. Searching for collection records. So collection records, they are identified by this M+ prefix plus a record ID. And they are stored in this LSR05 tag in the PNX record. And we have to query them. So I thought, let's do that. Let's try to search for an LSR05 tag, which is exact, and it needs to be with a record ID in there. And that was a bit of a, not going to say a problem, but I just didn't know how to do that. Because In Angular.JS, you have these services that you can use, but they are not always, or they are not immediately available in the controller. So what I ended up doing was what I actually promised not to do, because we had a meeting way back. They asked me, what are we going to do with jQuery Primo? Are we going to do something with it in the new UI? And I said, no, I want it to stop in Primo 4, and I don't want it in Primo 5 because I think there are better ways of doing these things, and there are. So, but this is still a product in development, so stuff will be completely different by November. But this was a challenge that I gladly accepted. And what I ended up doing was what I didn't want it to do, create an Angular service called ng Primo with some of the features of jQuery Primo, like searching by query, for example. This does the search. It returns a promise, so you can use 10 and then do some stuff with it. So, but let's step back a little bit, because I just want to clarify why I struggled. Searching in Primo is very easy. And Josh already mentioned it, and Guy already mentioned it. So you have this X services, which have proven to work. They are great. It's a bit of an older technology, and they might disappear because the new REST API is a lot more flexible. But one of the things is, if you're not hosted, at least, it's only accessible through the developer network. Okay, let's focus on the REST API. So what do we need to query a REST API? We need an API key, and you can get this API key on the developer network. It's very easy. Josh demonstrated this last Tuesday. And you have to put this API key in your URL or in a header, an HTTP header. So easy peasy, nothing wrong. So let's try to do this. Not readable, not important. You can watch it later in the slides. So if you spin up a browser like Gnome showed you, you can use this reload with debug information stuff in your console. And what you can do is you can just grab one of the Angular objects and say, well, I want to have this HTTP service which is in there. So that's what the highlighted thing is there for HTTP. var HTTP gets the HTTP service. So once we have this, we can start querying. So I made up a test of querying the developer network and querying Primo directly. Yeah. And remember this, querying Primo directly should not be possible because we are hosted. So test number 1, doing a call using the developer network, API key as a parameter, you see it. I've hidden my API key, although I don't believe that API keys are a way to secure stuff, but yeah, okay. Anyway, when you do this, you get an error message saying, well, your browser says this. By the way, if you're doing this in C, Perl, Ruby, Python, whatever language, there is no problem. But if you're doing it in your browser, your browser says, sorry, but you're not allowed to do this. So crash and burn, back to the drawing board. The next thing, trying to use a header, API key in the header. So here you see authorization, API key, and then my API key. And same result. Boom. You're not allowed to do this. So we're stepping it up a little bit more. So calling the REST API directly. So this should not work. API key as a parameter. And very strange, we have a success. So it says 200, which is good. So I thought, okay, well, API key in the header will work. No problem. Then I tried, API key in the parameter will work. So then I tried something else, API key as a header to do a direct search. And this, as expected, does not work. I'm not authorized to do that. So this is how it should function, because I have to use a developer network. So if we do an overview, except the green thing, which is actually, it shouldn't do that, but it does. So actually, you have no possibility to do queries in Primo in JavaScript, because the green one is a bug, obviously. So if you look at the errors, so it says your authorization token is missing, and it's strange because the methods allowed are get, post, delete, put, and options. So I can delete stuff, apparently, but I'm not authorized to read records. Yeah. So they can be rendered in HTML, but not as JSON objects. And the other one is the 401, unauthorized, so that's a normal thing. So I was thinking, what if you would just drop the API key? Would that work? Because that's how Xlibris does its calls in the single page application. So and apparently that also works. So you don't need an API key at all. It just works. So I like it just works. But this is because I noticed that there is a header down there. And that's what makes it work. I didn't set it myself. It's provided by Xlibris, which I thank them for. But I believe this should not happen. So, but there's another thing I noticed when I was well, these are numbers, not important. I'll show a graph in a second. So this is how I tried to test what the timing was. And the N is a network and D is direct call. So the first one takes up a bit of time because of all the HTTP setup stuff. So the second one is a bit faster, and then it kind of stays the same. So if you look at network calls and direct calls, there is almost a second of delay. I was doing this in my hotel room yesterday evening, so probably at home this will be half, but still it's a bit slower to do calls over the network. But we are deviating, so let's go back to where we were actually talking about creating a collection viewer in Angular.js. The huge problem with new technologies is that you don't know them, and I don't know them either. I just happened to stumble upon them, and luckily there are a lot of examples, like Gnome's examples. He says, why do people find this? It's not documentation, but actually your code is documentation. If we didn't have that, I would not have been able to produce this. So thank you for that. But actually, you just have to know one pattern, a page pattern, yeah. And also, you have to look at Gnome's presentation from this morning, because it explains a lot. So you only have to know this model view controller principle. It's not completely true, but yeah, you only have to know the model view controller principle, and then you should be able to create whatever widget you want. So if you look at it, Gnome also showed this. So I'm using template URL because I don't like HTML in my JavaScript, but that's a personal thing. So the view is the template URL. Then you have the controller that we have to write. And then there is this parent controller, which is at the moment not really a model. It's a view model or whatever you call it. So it contains a lot more stuff than just domain data. So Gnome also showed this. So the parent controller is inherited from its parent, the Primo full view in this example, and that's fine. So no problem. So if you look at the parent controller, you see that there is a lot of information in there, and most of this information you actually don't need. They're clutter. Your view, if you start doing stuff with this, it's like, why? I mean, this is hurting. And when Guy said this morning, the new UI is based on your pain, I understood why. Sorry. But anyway, so a model is very important. That's also why jQuery Primo was invented. A model just needs to contain, or domain object model needs to contain just purely domain information, nothing more, nothing less. Yeah, in this case, it actually contains a lot more, and probably you don't need that. So the controller, it should contain the logic that does the heavy lifting, so the conversions, the gathering of data, and so on. In this case, checking the existence of the markers, searching for the data, and parsing the data. And the view, which is this HTML template, is getting rendered after the component is created and the controller is rendered onto the template. So what I found, what was missing was a search service, so that I could actually search in Primo myself, and also a real domain object. So I'm interested in session information, in facets, in items, so in records, and not so much in all the other stuff which is in there for housekeeping. So if something could be done on these things, then I think the new Primo UI would be better than it is already. So, but we have been talking now, and you're probably wondering, did he actually succeed? Yeah, before we go there, the code is on GitHub, of course. I haven't made an NPM package out of it yet, but those will be the next steps. This is how I made it. So it's in the full view, and down there you find the images like we had in the previous example. So easy peasy. Yeah. So thank you. If you have questions, remarks, or just want to say hi, that's my email and so on. Oh, there is one more thing that I wanted to say. The thoughts, IDs, tricks, and document. It just contains my thoughts and my findings of the new Primo UI and how I learn or hack it. Thank you.
Okay, actually, we have time for a question this time. Any questions from anywhere? Oh, good. Otherwise, I was thinking now that we have time, no one's asking.
I have just 2 quick questions. Why is it, recently our programmer was working on something, and they were trying to use the get holdings API, and he coded everything in JSON, and then we looked on the API site, and you can only do it in XML. JSON doesn't work. Why is that the case? Why is the API limited to like XML in some cases, and then JSON in others, and why?
That's an excellent question, but I'm not ex-Libris, so.
Yeah.
But actually, it shouldn't matter if it's JSON or XML.
Yeah.
JSON works a lot faster in JavaScript, but
Right.
If it's XML, well, transform it into JSON and use jQuery Primo.
Yeah. And then my other question is, how does your collection viewer differ from like the collection viewer that's coming for Primo? I think that works with Rosetta. Well, we have Rosetta.
So as I said, we had this collection viewer before there was a collection viewer in Primo.
I see.
So, but if you want to transform this into the collection viewer that is, or the API that is going to be used with the new collection viewer in the old Primo UI,
Okay.
then that's possible. This is just a couple of lines of code because they have to do exactly the same thing as I did.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. One last question, anyone? Okay, in which case, let's thank Mehmet once again.
Thank you.
And we are now actually going to start our post-lunch schedule. So I'm just going to... Oh, wrong one.
We should also tell people who's next.
Yeah, I'm just doing that now. Right, so just so that everyone's clear who's next, the way the post-lunch schedule is going to work is we're going to have Carsten now, and followed by Carsten, we have Dean. Is Dean here? Yeah, great. And after Dean, we have Matthias? Oh, no, hold on. Is it? Oh, sorry, Bettina first, then Matthias. And I'm trying to find where Matthias is. Okay, good. Followed by which we have a break, and then we have Joan and Christine, and then Cindy, and then Lucas. Okay.
Make sure you remember all of that.
Yes.
Or just look in the developer day.
Yeah, developersday.info. Sorry, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much for letting me talk here. My name is Carsten. I am from Aalborg University Library, which is located in Denmark. If you go around, I think 1,000 kilometers south of here, you'll find us, not as cold. I'm here to talk to you about a project we are doing right now that is going to hopefully reduce the cognitive load in Primo. So it's both a user experience thing, but it's also a technical. We saw it as a challenge to see if we could solve this issue. So just a short disclaimer, there are probably a lot of legal and ethical issues. They tend to kill almost anything. So we thought, well, let's make this as a proof of concept, and then let's see if we can solve these other things. Now, I won't go into the brain as much as we did yesterday. This has not been tested on rats nor mice, but no one has got hurt in the development process. But the mind has been the overall focus of our project to reduce the cognitive load of users' work in Primo, because we think that a lot of users see a lot of records and they find it hard to grasp. So what's the problem? Well, search results almost look alike. And especially, well, if you have book jackets, they look a bit different. But when you've seen 2,000 book jackets, can you then remember, can you differentiate them from each other? And special articles all look the same. And users change their search strings in order to look for almost the same thing. I know our staff teaches them to use these long OR search strings, but they don't. They change the subject, oh, there's a record, oh, there's a word, I use that word, and then I search again, then they go on, and they do tens of searches around one single subject. And if they do use the long OR term, we will still have a time issue. So if you rerun your search, you'll have to look over each record again, see, have I seen this one before? And that was our mental question. Could we actually help the users in marking those records to have I seen those before? And we could perhaps even provide some documentation for the users, so when they finish their project, they can say, well, what did I actually see when I searched? And another challenge, and we have used this a lot, we didn't want to use any server-side programming in Primo. We've done that before a little bit, but it tends to break when an upgrade comes and all that, and you probably all know that song. So we came up with the idea called Personal Primo. So that's the working title of our project. And the idea is to say, can we in any way store information about the user, their behavior, features, attributes that can make it easier for the user. So the process was, well, we had one single technical issue that I'll get back to that was such a sort of a go, no-go. It was very small, but it was a technical problem. Then we held 2 focus groups with students, and some of them actually named this a killer feature for Primo. So we have done a test implementation for the proof of concept, but now we're sort of in a limbo. We are waiting for the new UI, and we want to implement that as fast as possible, but we're not sure if all the things we have done in the old UI is possible in the new UI. We use Mehmet's work a lot in this project, so we'll have to see where that ends in the new UI. So on the technical side, we want it to be embedded into Primo using client-side scripting. We've used a lot of jQuery and jQuery Primo. We could use server-side programming, but if we were to do that, it should be on our servers. In our controlled environment, we don't do Java. Of course, we needed a database to store everything, or a database-like structure. And then we have our own authentication mechanism, which we call PDS Plus, which is easily extendable, for instance, for confirmation of a user. So the first technical problem was actually identifying and be sure of the information that we could get from the UI, who are the user. Now, if you look into the PDS object, I can see that I can actually get my identifier, but it's easy to spoof, and we didn't really want to talk to PDS about this, because talking to PDS, we've done that a lot, but we won't do that anymore. So we needed some kind of trust mechanism to identify the user that could supplement the ID. So PDS Plus was actually developed for something completely different. We needed a mechanism where we could authorize the user not only in Aleph, but also in a central authentication system in order to make sure that they were a student or a employee. And we found an attribute in PDS that wasn't used by our Primo, at least. I just emailed my co-worker Casper to ask him what is it actually used for, and we think it's some kind of metalib thing. But the resource status was empty. So we thought, well, we can place something there, and then we can actually get into that from the user interface. So what we do is that we generate, whenever a user session starts, we generate a secret key for the user that we can then retrieve in the user interface. So this is my resource status. It's not current, so you cannot use that anymore. But this I can re-verify. So we needed something that was auto-generated, easy verifiable, and it should be a unique key for the user session. So what happens is that a user logs into Primo, and jQuery Primo talks through to the PDS system, and we get the bore info back, and we get the user ID, but we also get the secret. So that is handed back into the user interface, and I can now use it in my JavaScript call. I can call my personal Primo service with using jQuery, and I can pass the user parameter and the secret. I can then verify, was this secret okay? So you can use, we use at the current moment MD5, but we can step up in algorithms to make it even more secure. And then personal Primo will send back, well, in this case, we could send a record ID. So have this user seen this record ID before? So I'll try to do a live demo. I'll just search for Nielsen. That's a very common Danish name, last name. And there you have it. So it actually marked that this record I have seen 21 minutes and 13 seconds ago. So now we have assisted the user. So whenever the user searches for Carl Nielsen, or let's search for this name. There, it's marked I've seen it in another search, but I didn't see that one before. And we can use this for both authorized and non-authorized users. But of course, we cannot store a user session for non-authorized users because we cannot recognize it, he or she, the next time they come in. But we can actually store it, and when they then log in, we can store backwards in time for their user session. So the code from the client side is very easy peasy. I'm not a what you call a cool programmer type. What we do is we save the search at first. So we save the user query, the facets and all that. We use the same structure that is used by jQuery Primo, so we store that into the database. And after we have stored the search, we can then start storing the records. We have utilized a library called appear. So right now we're only storing the records that the user actually looks on. So if you have a record at the end of the page, that is not stored for now. Now the code on the client side right now is written in PHP. We'll probably write that in another language later. The most important part right now is actually to validate the user, and we have made a very, very simple API for our PDS Plus service where we can give a user ID and the secret key. And the secret key also has a expiry date, or time, so it will expire eventually. We can save the record to the database and then we can return the previous state of the record if there is any. Otherwise, we'll just do it later on. Now, the database structure right now is quite simple, but we will have to rethink that. I just saw our analytics last year. We presented 12.5 million records for users. They are not all signed in, so we can dismiss at least some of that, but we will have to rethink this structure when we go live. But at the current moment, it works. Some issues, of course, we know our users would like this as facets. We cannot give them that for now, but with endless scrolling, it will be a bit easier to, well, skip that, don't show that. We need to store some extra information about Ferber and DDAP, especially if it changes. This can be a long period, so this might change, so we might actually need to store, at least for DDAP, the underlying record IDs. We need stable record IDs from Ex Libris for articles and further. And of course, we have the case where records are deleted, so we have some IDs where we cannot resolve them, perhaps after half a year. What we are thinking about is doing a small database, at least with title and author and year, that each night we go through the database, just saving that information for later use. So if the user comes after half a year, we have seen this with, for instance, the eShelf with the records disappearing, we can at least give the title and an author and a year. And as I mentioned, speed, we have 12.5 million records shown in last year, but we can of course reduce that number a lot. Now the potential in this, besides supporting the overload of the user from a mental point of view, we can give the user overall search history or per record. So what search terms did I actually use to find this record? We can store user personal settings. We have made a small test of just storing simple key values. So for instance, how does the user want to see or indicate that a record has been seen before? Some might like it blurred, some might like an icon, some might like something completely else. But we can store easy key value pairs for a user and then draw their settings back into Primo. That gives a lot of options for us. We are looking into storing interaction level, so differentiating between, have I just seen a record? Have I actually clicked the details? Have I visited it? Have I exported it into my reference handling system? We are looking into, and the database is already prepared for this, looking to have search organized into projects. So for instance, if our staff are helping multiple users, they can create several projects, because you might have to reassess a record if it's for a completely new search. What this project will also give us is the ability to facilitate group work. So we can now make, and that's very important for us because we are a PBL-based university, we are able to facilitate group work and collaborative search. So why should I look at records that my fellow group worker has already looked at? So that is the potential, and I think that's the presentation.
We've got time for a question, if anyone has a question. Okay.
Back there.
Sure. My name is Kjell Olsen. I work at the university here in Trondheim, NTNU. My question is regarding privacy issues. How is that, let's say, accommodated? Can you opt out easily, or what are your options?
Our initial thought is actually to, first of all, have this as an opt-in. So we don't do this by default for a user. So they must know what they opt in for. We are also thinking about making a incognitive mode. So even if you have to opt in, you can go incognito and say, well, this search shouldn't be saved. And there can be a lot of reasons for not wanting to save a search. It could be a very sensitive search in kind of patterns, or it could be a search that will, I mean, it's just like when you're shopping gifts at Amazon, you would like to go incognito instead of having to look at children's books the next 12 months because you bought one single birthday present. So yeah, there are some privacy issues, and we will have to look into these before launching the product. But we were looking to make this as a proof of concept because we think it's really cool, and then we have to overcome the other problems.
And can I just say how nice it is to see a previous award winner using the current award winner work? That's how the developers community should be working. So really pleased to see that. We have, I'm assuming, who's next? We have Dean now, so thank you very much, Dean. So Dean's joining us from Purdue University, and he's going to talk about extending Alma's API functionality. Thank you very much, Dean. Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. Everybody here okay? So hello, yes. My name is Dean Lingley, coming from Purdue University. And my original title when I created this presentation was using Alma APIs, but I kind of consider myself a little bit more of a hacker than a software developer, coming from a system administration background. So kind of scratched out the using to hacking. So who am I? Oh, let me start my timer too. So no, okay, so grew up on the farm in Illinois. We got the tractor. Come from Hoopeston, Illinois, which is the home of the corn jerkers, and that's actually the jerky was our high school mascot. So that's a little fact for everybody. Sweet corn capital of the world, actually, Hoopeston, Illinois. So 2 hours south of Chicago. I attended school at the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. I worked for Accenture for a couple years prior to getting out of the traveling business. When our first 13-year-old was born, I was like, I don't want to be traveling anymore. So I got a job at the University of Notre Dame, working in the HR department, doing business consulting work for them. And then 11 years ago, I applied for a job at Purdue University Libraries, where I've been ever since, so we could be closer to family back in Hoopston. So that's a brief overview of who I am and where I've been. Another interesting fact that I just found out about last month, and I think it was kind of appropriate when I found out we'd be coming to Norway, was the fact that I am approximately 9% Scandinavian. So 9% of me is back home right now, which I was like, oh, cool. The other funny thing about this slide is the 70% Great Britain, because I've been known to drive my wife crazy a little bit with a British accent at times, and then so she was like, oh, now I know why you like to do that. So my genes are causing me to speak with an accent at times. So I was happy to get these results as well. For those who don't know where Purdue University is, right there on the star, we have it's the cradle of astronauts and cradle of quarterbacks, although in the since Drew Brees was the quarterback back in like 2001, the quarterback part has been a little bit less than a cradle, I would say. This is one little fact about Purdue University Libraries I just want to share with everybody. The dean at the libraries, he's been there about 12 years, Jim Mullins. This has kind of been his baby, so to speak. Ever since he came to Purdue, he'd wanting to create a new library building. I don't think there had been a new building at Purdue since like the mid-70s or something like that. So anyway, next fall, 2017, the Wilmeth Active Learning Center is coming to fruition. So it's just kind of something that we're looking forward to and kind of proud of. It's mixed space use, so it'll be classrooms and a library building, but definitely something Purdue is happy to have constructed. Okay, now let's talk about Alma a little bit. So Purdue, we were development partners with Ex Libris on Alma. Prior to it even being called Alma, I would think. In 2009, we started, different people in the libraries were involved in the functional creation process and, functional overviews and things like this. And we went live in 2009. Sorry, I'm going to get my notes here on the thing. Okay, we went live with Alma in May of 2013, but we kept our Voyager server running because the media scheduling functionality was not developed well enough really for what we were using it for. We were using media scheduling to book equipment, and the calendar functionality was not inside Alma yet. So even though we went live with Alma in May 2013, we've kept our Voyager server running. That is until Legacy starts smoking. And I just love these pictures of the cigarettes in Turkey because we flew through Istanbul on our way here, with a long story. But we flew through Istanbul, and I love to see these smoking warning things. So anyway, your server smoking is not good either, apparently. So I think server smokers die younger too. So that was the impetus behind looking at our what we could do with APIs. So again, Alma native booking, not quite as well developed yet. Didn't have the functionality to view all your bookings in one place and things like this. So along came API-enabled equipment booking. So basically, this is the application I created. And it only took about 3 weeks, so that's why I consider this kind of hacking too. I mean, I'm familiar with development languages and stuff like that. But basically it was just like looking at PHP, looking at some, JavaScript packages, jQuery, those type of things. And was able to come up with something, basically I was approaching it to like a prototype, is all I was wanting to do, can this be done? And ended up with something which was functional, so quite happy about it. So you sign in to the calendar view, you can create a new booking. The people at the desk, if somebody comes up, they can create a new booking using this web app too. And for our authentication, we use Shibboleth and CAS at Purdue. So the sign-on and the sign-on and authentication piece is done inside PHP using Shib and CAS modules. So the APIs we're using are the bib and config read-only, and then users in a read-write mode. So that was booking. Now we'll talk about the next problem we had was inventory. So in addition to going live with Alma in May of 2013, our largest library, which holds about 700,000 books, it's our humanities library at Purdue, also was switching to using a library, switching from Dewey to a Library of Congress classification. So with that switch happening and not doing inventory, after we went live with Alma, we didn't do inventory for about 3 years. There was an issue with all the new LC books that were coming in getting lost, being put back in wrong places and stuff like that. So anyway, we waited. We were kind of waiting for the Alma inventory product to come out. And it did meet some needs, but it didn't quite meet the entire needs of what the staff were looking for. So that led to our next piece of API development, which is this shelf list inventory app. And it's pretty simple. Basically, the staff, and when I go back to Voyager, when they were using Voyager, they were used to scanning the barcodes. They'd have students go with the scanners and create a list of barcode files, and then come back to the computer and run the out of order, the missing, those type of lists. So they really wanted that. I mean, I tried to kind of convince them to maybe do a different approach, but in working with them, I kind of was convinced that rather than doing like the shelf lister approach where you've got the list of what should be there and then marking the inconsistencies that way, they convinced me that the way they wanted to do it is a valid and fairly effective way. So anyway, the app, they scan the barcodes, upload them to the web form, which is, again, it's prototypey, but it works. They fill in all their criteria they're looking for, and then it just spits out the report that shows them the problems that have been found. And then also the piece that Alma couldn't provide, which they really wanted, was the fact that it might tell them that a book is not there, but since the way they're scanning these things, they had no idea of the context of what order that particular book was scanned in. So really that's kind of what this app provided for them, is giving them context to know, okay, this book that's currently between there needs to move back 12 spaces or whatever. So that was the benefit. And again, this one is using just the bib and config API and read-only. One other small project we've been working on is EDS and Alma. EBSCO was looking to sell us their search product and wanting to see what the Alma APIs could do. So we've been working with them a little bit to see if, how they might work and what can be done. So we've been doing some testing, but it's not ready to, implement in production, but it's something that we have been looking at. The one thing I would point out that I do think they have nice, and I know I've talked to the Ex Libris folks about this, and I've heard this is coming in Primo, which I think is kind of neat, is and maybe we can do it with Angular right now, but when you're signed in, you get the contextual information about the item that you have checked out right on the screen, which I think is kind of cool. So if you're in the catalog and you happen to have the book checked out, it'll tell you that, and you can renew or whatever in the brief, in the list of results, which I think is kind of a cool design idea. This is another one that I just threw in because I remembered it the other day, and this is using the Primo API. But we also want to try to save students money at Purdue, and this is one of the things we developed to help show that the library is in line with that goal. So we have the course catalog on the left, and then if a student's looking for a class or whatever, there's a link you can click on the course materials link, and then it'll use this little API, kind of intermediary service we've used, which then takes the ISBN basically and queries the Primo PNX and runs some business logic depending upon if we have physical access or online access, and then looks at a little bit more at the licensing ability of the ebook if it's there, and try to warn them that, yeah, we have access, but it's only one view, one person at a time, basically, or unlimited. So that's one of the things we've been working on. So the web technologies utilized. PHP has been the main thing for both the, actually everything. Using the textbook lookup service, the call number, the inventory tool, and then the booking tool. One thing that I've thought about doing as the next step is maybe trying to recreate this in Angular as a good kind of learning project, but when time allows. So it's using Bootstrap, and then we're hosting our code locally in a GitLab install. So any challenges? The only problems that we've seen so far are limits on the amount of API calls, possibly with that. If that EDS, the way they designed the EDS, they were using an API call per search result on the screen, so they could run into issues. I've already explained that to them, and that could be an issue with that. Speed of API calls, so the barcode to item call is one barcode at a time. So if they try to upload 9,000 barcodes at one time, it can break things, and she'll have to run it. The person who's running this will email me, oh, it's not working, and then I don't get back to her, and then like 2 hours later, she says it worked. So, but just small things like that. We had a small regression issue in April, but I talked to Josh at the Eluna conference, and it was fixed like a month later, so not a big deal. So my next steps are possibly reworking the cache again with the 9,000 items, and things slow down the way I've created the cache with the PHP, because I'm writing the cache to a file, and there could be some efficiency improvements there. Cleaning up the code, scrubbing the code, and then sharing it. I'm maybe by October 31st, that's my goal. I'll put this, and I'll write a blog post. And then possibly next projects that I've been thinking about, using APIs to move data for items. The other thing that I just thought about is maybe, as a proof of concept, is maybe extending the Alma mobile view to do a shelf read, which probably it will have already, but just things that can, as next steps. So that's it. I did want to mention too this, and I actually got this when I gave a presentation at the Eluna conference. Mehmet gave a good presentation at the developer day there talking about data sharing. I just want to mention this. If you guys get time, read this post here. The internet has been stolen from you, take it back nonviolently. And he's basically talking about like Facebook and Google and stuff, and using Merkle chains to try to create a kind of privately held data accessibility model. So anyway, I find that interesting. I wanted to share that while I had the chance. Okay, so I have time for questions, I guess.
Thank you very much, Dean, and thank you for saving us some time as well.
Yeah, no problem.
We have time for one or two quick questions. Anyone? Okay. In which case, thank you very much, Dean, once again. And we have Bettina now, who's going to talk about the work that she's done with Alma.
now. I'm going to be very brief, first of all because we are late in the schedule, and also because what I have to report upon is neither developing nor technical in the strict sense of the word. It's more a description of what we had to do to get bibliotheca and Alma work together, and that was a rough way. So when we started with Alma in March this year, the integration of RFID by bibliotheca and Alma was not ready yet. So what we had on our main circulation desk were 2 self-service stations, and that was fully functional at go live. But we had a problem with the staff workstations. They could, of course, loan and take back books in Alma, but they had to use a separate software supplied by bibliotheca. The bibliotheca Smart Station Manager Circ to change the security bit so that people could take the books out of the library without the alarm ringing. So this was a major problem for the people working at the circulation desk. And then we started on the long and winding road. It was really not fun. We tried to configure everything according to documentation on the Alma side, which was smooth, which was easy, which worked exactly as described in the documentation. But we needed bibliotheca software. At this point, the only indication we had was in the integration profile that you have to configure inside Alma, that when you have bibliotheca, you need Liberate Connect. So in April, we started to ask bibliotheca for Liberate Connect, and they said, you confuse us, we do not know Liberate Connect. We have no idea what you are talking about. And this is when we started our way down the long and winding road. In the end, it was a major effort by Ex Libris Jerusalem, Bibliotheca in Georgia, USA, Bibliotheca in the UK, and us in Mannheim, trying somehow to force Bibliotheca Germany to give us license codes to operate the software. A guy from the United States had to install the software on one of our computers, just as a proof of concept. Afterwards, I talked to Bibliotheca Germany again, and they still said that Liberate Connect, although they heard about this, is not available on the German market. So 3 months after we knew that it would work exactly as described in the documentation, and we had one computer doing that, finally they agreed to give us a second license, so now we can just work with it. How to get there is, as I told you, read the manual, it's all there, and it works exactly as described. Of course, you have to get to configure the hardware, you have to install all the drivers, you have to configure the integration profile, you have to install a proxy server, everything according to documentation. The only problem that I had when I installed and configured our second computer on the circ desk was that in the beginning it didn't work because I made a mistake and the 2 ports were not the same. The moment I found that and I changed both to 5000, you can take whatever port you want, of course, everything went on really, really smooth. And then you have an integration of RFID and Alma everywhere where it makes sense, everywhere where you scan in an item, where you can enter manually or scan in an item code. And these are the Alma points where you find it. So then when everything is configured, you just place the item on the scan station, you click on one of these blue symbols, it reads in the barcode and does exactly what you expect it to do at this point of the software. There are issues. Bibliotheca Germany sells Liberate Connect at 500 euros. So that's okay if you just need it for your circulation desk. But if you want to do this at every workstation where people receive items and acquisition, it's going to be very expensive, very fast. And we have suggestions where I think that Ex Libris could be involved. In the former integration between Aleph and Bibliotheca software, you could place a whole stack of books and have them loaned or scanned in back into the library automatically. Now you have to do this book by book by book. That would be a nice feature if it would be possible again to do this in bulk. And we have about 150 workstations where people work with the Alma client. Everybody is now seeing this RFID symbol, although only 2 computers at the main circulation desk actually use it, because only they have all the software and the hardware installed. So it would be nice to see these symbols only when it makes sense. And this is about it, short, and I hope not too many questions open.
Thank you, Bettina. I think this is quite useful actually, because Bibliotheca has acquired 3M, and in the UK market at least we are really worried now, so very useful for that. Any questions for Bettina? Okay.
Yes, Bettina, do you use any kind of sorter also in your library?
Yes, we do, but it's not from Bibliotheca.
But it integrates with Alma?
Yes.
Okay.
It's Danish.
I was going to say, are you recommending it then?
Yes. Talk to Christian.
Yeah, we can recommend.
Hold on, there's another comment.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
I'll just say, first of all, Bettina, sorry you had to go through that and your pain. I feel your pain, but I just want to say that if you do have Bibliotheca or 3M software, or even if you don't, and you're interested in an interesting integration story, you can go check out how that works together. And from a purely technical perspective, if you think about it, it's a cloud system having to interact with a locally installed RFID reader, which is an interesting challenge academically, technically. So if you're bored on the weekend and you're interested in seeing how that was done or how we chose to solve it, you can go look at the documentation that Bettina pointed to.
Thank you very much, Josh. We're technical people. We're never bored on the weekends.
Can I step down now?
Yes. Anyone? Anything else? Okay. Hold on, Bettina. One more.
Just out of curiosity, do you have like a wand that you can use with a portable like
No.
iPad to take inventory?
Actually, we have one that we bought, Christian, correct me, maybe 5 years ago from Bibliotheca, but it never really went into production. It's actually, I don't know where it is at this point of time. But we are doing research projects with the together with the university to develop something else for checking shelves.
Thanks.
So I may answer this. There is an interesting tool from an Hungarian company that is named Odin, who just developed a method to do inventory using a single smartphone. But it depends on that. Though that depends on the frequency you have in your RFID tags. So. So if you make the decision, then you use the highest frequency that is available on the market, because with the RFID tags we use, that isn't possible at the moment. So please be aware of this.
Okay, I think this time I'll make sure no one asks you any more questions.
I'm going to stay here until the next one starts.
No, I think we need to move on as well. So thank you very much, Bettina, once again. Okay, and moving forward, we have, oh, Matthias, yes.
He's over there.
Oh, making my life so much easier. Thank you so much. Actually, what Matthias is presenting on is something I'm personally quite interested in. I was trying to present on it last IGeLU Developers Day without much success, so I'm hoping Matthias will do an amazing job this time.
Okay, can you hear me okay in the back? Yeah, okay. That's weird. That was the shortcut. Okay. So yeah, I'm Matthias Einbrot. I'm an assistant librarian at the University Library of Bolzano, which is in northern Italy. I'm talking to you about our development of a mobile app, which we did in the last year, basically, after the Angular.JS Ionic talk was presented the last Developers Day. I won't do any live coding, so I won't take that risk. And actually, I don't want to show you the app either, what it does. I rather want to talk about the challenging problems we had during the development process, the errors we made, or I say we, but actually it's me personally. So, and the lessons we learned from that, basically. I think it's much more interesting to get a discussion going, maybe to learn from it as well. Yeah, one more thing. In the program that was written, it's a web app. It's actually a mobile app. My fault, because I always get the terminology wrong. I will explain in a minute what I meant. Well, what is our app in a nutshell? It's a web app based on Angular.JS 1.5 something and Ionic 1.3 something. And what does it actually mean? Well, a web app, you can just open it in a browser. So this is our app. As you can see, it has been loaded locally in our browser, or in my browser. And it works like an Angular.JS application, a single-page application that was described before. Regarding the functionality, yeah, well, we implemented the eShell functionality, loans, requests, fines and fees, the Primo search functionality, and we interfaced some of our own systems, let's say a new system for our library, and the opening hours of our library via Google Calendar. And after that, after creating this web application, we sort of translated it to a mobile application for Android and iOS using the so-called Cordova framework. And what do I mean by translating? Well, the Cordova framework allows you to automatically create a bare-bones app, yeah, that loads a so-called HTML rendering engine, a so-called web view that displays the web app. In more simpler terms, imagine a native app container loading a browser in full screen mode that just displays this web app I've shown you before. And then you get sort of the illusion of a native application. And as you can see here, the Cordova framework offers you a command line interface that allows you to build this bare bones app in a really easy way. Basically, you don't have to do anything. Just run this command in the command line and you're good to go. Ideally. Sometimes it doesn't work, but most of the time it does. So, however, there are some discussions regarding Cordova or hybrid apps versus truly native apps. And on the plus side of a Cordova app, you have one single code base. So you have only HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. If I had written a native app, I would have had to use basically two programming languages, Objective-C for iOS environments and Java for Android environment. And also regarding the native functionality, you can access it by a Cordova app through plugins, okay? And there's a large ecosystem of them. However, and this is true, Cordova apps are performing slower than truly native apps. This is something you have to take into consideration, and not all native functionality is accessible. I actually wanted to show you how well or how not so well this app is performing on my really shitty smartphone here, on Android. But I don't have a Android to VGA adapter, so you just have to believe me that it is slower. Okay, not a really cool pitch for my app. Okay, let's come to the challenges. Well, before you start implementing or developing, you have to, of course, get API keys, because we want to interface Alma and Primo APIs. And you do that by creating them in the Exlibris API portal, okay? You do this by creating so-called apps. And an app allows you to access one or more Ex Libris APIs. And access is defined in terms of the operation, so read and or write, and the environment. So we have a sandbox and a production environment. So for instance, let's say we create an app called Pipo. It has a read and write access to the user's API in the production environment. That's basically what you have to do. And then you get an API key, which you have to append or send along with your HTTP request to the final API endpoint. Oh, there's a problem with it. At least how I perceive it. Maybe it's not a problem at all, but to me I can't get my head around this. So, in our use case, we only needed a small subset of the user API methods. Okay, the get loan list, it needs read access, and the renew single loan method, it needs of course write access because you have to modify some data on the server. However, as I told you before, you can only grant read or write access to the whole user API group, to all methods of this user API. So now I'm wondering what happens if the API key you get is compromised somehow, okay? So you send the API key via mail or something like that happened in our environment, okay? So shouldn't happen, but it happened. So an attacker can then actually execute all the methods within this user API group, okay? For instance, he can retrieve all the user information, and he can also delete single users. So in my opinion, this presents a serious problem. And it might be a solution to define access restriction based on a single API method, rather than just the whole group. Maybe that's something that is doable in the future. Second thing is you have API thresholds. It means that you have a limited number of API calls per day for your institution through this API gateway. The formula is, I found it on the official documentation. I don't know if it's correct anymore, if Ex Libris just increased it, but it's what I found was Alma named users times 1,000. And this is not a criticism of API thresholds. They make sense, of course, for security reasons, stability reasons. However, the way when an API threshold is reached is a little bit problematic because it blocks then subsequent requests through the API portal for all your apps you have created in the meantime in your ecosystem. Well, and the possible solution I thought of might be to just scope the threshold per app. So you define a certain threshold per single app you create. Because the problem is, and again, maybe it's not just it's just a theoretical problem. Maybe I'm just too anxious. I mean, is the oven off? Did I close the windows after leaving the house? Am I reaching the API threshold by writing this code? So this is basically me. However, as Ex Libris told us, the API usage is increasing. It already is 30% of the total API, of the total Alma traffic. And of course, a developer can introduce a bug in its app that can cause the zillion of requests to the API. And at 12 p.m., okay, before lunch, everything stops, and you can go home and come back the next day, basically. So this is food for thought, basically, just to give you my idea. So coming back to the performance, why are Cordova apps or hybrid apps slower than native apps? So a native app directly interacts with the operating system. Okay, it's faster. And as I told you, a web app is opened in the web view, and the web view then interacts with the operating system, and this is of course slower. And also native apps can be multi-threaded, whereas web apps are single-threaded. However, there might be a solution to circumvent this using a web workers technology. It comes with its own set of challenges and problems. But yeah. In our case, we didn't find a satisfactory answer to that. I mean, from my, let's say, justification sort of is, we say, okay, we just display a list of information, open modal windows sometimes and have minimal animations, and it works okay on powerful devices, iPhones and etc. And we think it's still usable on less powerful devices. You realize it's slower, but it's still usable. And our hope is that the performance of smartphones or mobile devices will increase across the board in the future, so the problem hopefully slightly or slowly disappears. However, this is not a very, I agree, it's not, it's more an explanation to keep me calm rather than a good answer here. However, the lesson learned from that is that you should absolutely develop a mobile app if you want to do this on the most powerless device you can get your hands on. Because if you can make something work on this device in an okay fashion, you can be sure it works well on a powerful device. And it's also some psychological advantage. Okay, so it works not so good on this powerless device. However, then you open it on an iPhone and everything works fine. So that's actually good. And also, there's the claim of one single code base revisited. With mobile apps, there's a problem. The request, or problem, it's just design constraint basically. The HTTP request from a mobile app to an Exlibris API endpoint needs to be routed through an API proxy. Why is that? Because the API keys, I told before, can't be put directly in the JS source code, because JavaScript is downloaded completely onto the client and executed there, and it's not even compiled. So you can view the whole JavaScript source code. Let me show you what I mean by that. So I created a small, can you see that? Yeah, okay. Created a small application here, and I opened Firebug on the side. Maybe just do it like this, okay? And what you can do actually with this, you can sort of see the network traffic that's going out and coming in. So if I issue a request, zack, okay, with Firebug I can see actually here the network traffic, and then I can look at the parameters, and I have here the API key, and I can use that. Another thing you can do is just look at the JavaScript that's loaded, all right? No, it's here. jQuery API key, JS. And then you can find here the API key in the source code itself. So you need an API proxy. Yeah, and you need it also to authenticate requests for user-related information. Okay, that contain hopefully authentication tokens coming from your client app. And in our case, we have a proxy server written in C#, the .NET framework, and yeah. 2 code bases, so the C# code base and our client app code base. Of course, there are proxy as a service solutions, APIG, Amazon AP Gateway, so you don't need to program anything, you just need to configure, manage something via web-based graphical user interfaces, but still, it's not just the client side you program at the end of the day, it's also the backend systems you have to take care of, okay? So you have to factor that in, absolutely, something I had to learn. Next up is client-side caching. A problem. So you have 2 clients, let's say an Alma graphical user interface and a mobile app. And let's assume for the sake of simplicity that both clients request user loans list at the same time, okay? And just a moment later, a librarian that uses the client 1 returns 1 item of the user. So the question now is, how can the web app know about this change? This is actually an interesting question. And then, of course, getting the data from the server is slower than getting it from the cache. Although here in Norway, it's actually really fast, I have to say. It's some ways the difference is not so large anymore. Then you have IP thresholds, so you can't make an unlimited number of requests to the server. So the question then actually is, how can a client display the most recent data in a fast way with the lowest possible number of requests to the server? And when you look at the solutions, you have actually some characteristics. Yeah, you want the fast loading speed. You want the total number of API calls to be low. You want a high data freshness, and ideally you want no implementation effort at all. And well, if you think about it, you can say, okay, no caching at all, right? The user, for instance, clicks to see his or her loans, sends an HTTP request to Alma, Alma processes the request, sends the response back to the client, and the loans are displayed to the user. In terms of characteristics, the data freshness is high, the implementation effort is none. However, the loading speed is slow, depends where you are, of course. In Norway, maybe not. In Italy, slower. And the total number of API calls is high. So it's actually just a very viable solution in a world with super fast networks and no API thresholds, in my opinion. So don't use that, or we didn't use that. Second idea is to cache the data for a certain period of time t. So what happens? A user clicks to see his or her loans, and then it is checked, has a certain time period t passed. If no, okay, the data is served up directly from the cache. If yes, then this data is served from the Alma server. Characteristics here, loading speed, data freshness, and implementation effort. Of course, loading speed, total number of API calls, and data freshness depend on the time period, of course. So if you cache it only for 1 second, then, of course, all these things will not be so cool. The implementation effort is, well, I would say some. And in our app, we implemented that for the electronics holding data. So we cached that for roughly 10 minutes and the user authentication token. Let me show you that real quickly. Okay, let's go to our app. Let's go to the network monitoring of Firebug. Can you see that in the back as well? Okay, cool. So let's search something. Let's search for XSLT. Okay. Let's filter it to get only online resources. Okay, let's switch it to English, otherwise you might be lost. Okay, and now we say, okay, get me the electronic holding information of XSLT from duck Tidwell. Okay, view it, and as you can see here, XHR, a request was issued to this endpoint, our API proxy basically. And if we then open it again, no request is issued, it's delivered directly from the cache. In terms of speed, you don't see any difference here because, again, Norway has super fast networks. In Italy, you would see some difference here. Okay, back to the presentation. Okay, thread solution. We load the data once when the user logs in, for instance, cache it as long as no discrepancy between the client and server data is detected. What do I mean by that? The discrepancy. Let me show you. Back to the app. Logging in. Okay, I can put everything in here. It's just, it logs me in always with the same user, but it's live data from Alma production instance. Okay. So I go to my accounts, go to loans. Okay. Now I open my Alma instance, or our Alma instance. Just hang in here. I have a slightly long password. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so we're in. So now let's create a discrepancy. So it's basically the same scenario I presented to you just a couple of minutes ago. 2 clients accessing the same resource, and then 1 client changing the resource by itself. So I'm deleting 1 loan for this user. So we have here, let's see, communication what? And here we have communication what, so I just say action, delete loan, confirm, okay, and it's deleted. However, this client doesn't actually know about this, basically. How could he? So it's not, there's no, until now, no method for the server to actively inform the client what he can do. Maybe talk about this a little bit later. So now, the client wants to renew this loan. Okay, it's renewing, and he gets a message: the renewal failed. Please refresh the loan list. Okay, so basically, what happens on the Alma side is that it sends an error request saying the loan doesn't exist anymore, basically. So, and I don't know if it's a good approach in terms of usability, user experience. The idea was to say, okay, if I renew a loan, okay, and if something happens, unexpected happens, I want to inform the user as transparently as possible. I don't want to trigger an automatic reload of the loans list, because that's not what the user expects. I rather want to tell the user what to do. To be completely honest, it's not battle tested. I don't know if this will work. Hopefully it will work. So now we refresh the loan list, and refresh is successful, and you see the updated loan list, basically. Right. In terms of characteristics, well, loan speed or loading speed is fast because you only have to reload the resource from the server if it actually changed. Total number of API calls, well, low, hopefully. Data freshness, okay, is also low, and the information effort is, I would say, high, because you have to find these points where discrepancies can occur. And yeah, we implemented this, as I've shown you, for the loans, requests, and fines and fees data. Okay, another thing is that you already seen is that we gave the client, the user, the ability to refresh its user data where it made sense. So we hope this is decreases user confusion regarding data freshness on the client between on the server. Well, are there other solutions possible for this? Maybe using e-tags, reactive style data handling, which is basically that a database is mirrored on the client side and then synced somehow with the server. Or a really interesting approach also, and I think this is a good use case, are webhooks, actually. I talked a little bit about, sorry, I'm not good with names, I'm really, Josh. Yeah, I talked a little bit about Josh, and it's definitely possible. And the interesting thing is actually that completely reverse the flow of data. So instead of the client always asking the server, hey man, did something happen? The client, the server actually tells the client when something did happen. And in terms of API thresholds, data freshness, this is really the way to go, in my opinion. Yeah, lesson learned. Client-side caching is complex, at least from my point of view. So don't underestimate that. Next up, the electronic holding information. When I do a search via the PNX API, you already get a precompiled link to the HTML representation of an Alma URL solver holding information page in the Get It One section of the response. This is the link, okay? However, it's in HTML, and actually I want a more machine-readable format for a seamless integration. And what you can do, it's a little hack, however it's documented, so I don't know how much of a hack it is, but you can just change the svuz dat query parameter from what was it before? From viewed to CTO. Okay, and you will get hopefully it works, yep. Just show you the XML. You will get an XML representation of the electronic holding information, holding data of this record. Here's the metadata, and here's the holding information data. And then you can use it to seamlessly integrate this in your app and application wherever you want it. How am I doing with the time, by the way? Yeah, I'm good, okay. Yeah, let's get back. Right. So here's also the link to the documentation that documents this behavior. Then I tried to do the same thing for the print holding information. And unfortunately, this doesn't work, so now what? So what I get, just to show you real quick, of course I get the metadata, again, for the print item, or for the print record, but I don't get any holding information. So that was, just to say it beforehand, that was, now comes one of my biggest errors I made during the development of this app. I said, hey, okay, let's use the Alma BIBs API. So what you need is, you need the method to get all the holdings of a record, to get all the items of this holding, and to get all the item level information, okay? Problem number one, however, was that, at least in our Pinix result records, no MMSID was present. However, we solved that somehow. we got around this. So basically, when getting back here to this XML representation of the holding information, you can see the MMSID. Yeah, we see it. Cool. Here. Okay. All right. We produced a simple prototype. I showed it to my boss, and then we stopped the development because I actually realized that I was duplicating Alma UI resolver business logic completely on the client side, which is actually a completely idiotic thing to do. Just to name a few, it's the rules for the allowed pickup location for a physical title item level request. Okay, and what was going on there in my mind? So I was thinking, hey, okay, yeah, I found a way around to get the MMSID. So I was like in the zone, so to say. Okay. And 3 days or 4 days after that, I realized, not so good. Also, there's another problem. It takes a lot of API calls, okay, to get this information. For instance, if you want to get a holding information for one record with one holding containing 40 items, okay, you need roughly 42 API requests. So that's nothing you want to do in terms of API thresholds. So lesson learned, yeah, think before coding. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't reinvent the wheel or don't repeat yourself. V1 is actually one of this. If there are 10 commandments for developers, it would be one of it. So I didn't respect that. And I ended up with displaying the Alma UI resolver holding data HTML page in an in-app browser, okay, using the precompiled link that was in the PNX result. To show you that how it looks. Oh, no, I can't show you that how it looks because I don't have access to the in-app browser here on my local Firefox. It works, okay. It's absolutely the right thing to do, given what I have, given the time I have, given what XLibris offers already. However, I would like a JSON XML API endpoint for the Alma UI resolver. In my opinion, would be a better option. It allows for a seamless integration of UI resolver holding data also in mobile apps. Not just mine, also Campus M, for instance. And I think it would also reduce accessibility issues on client where the UI resolver holding data information is inserted via an iframe, for instance, Primo or Leganto. Batch operations. What are batch operations? So sometimes if you want to modify a certain number of resources, you need to do the same amount of API calls as there are resources. The example is you want to change the due date of 200 loan resources. You have to do 200 post requests to the API endpoint. And the problem is, yeah, you have to make that many HTTP connections, which is slower. And you have an increased risk of reaching the API threshold. Just to, I can show you that actually, what happens. Okay, just get the, oops, okay, so I want to renew all loans. Okay, and then it starts. And then you see all these requests for the resources. It's 17 right now. But however, we also have patterns that have 100 items on loan. I even heard from a colleague here there are patterns who have 1,000 items on loan. Okay, so in my opinion, oh man, I have to go back like this here. In my opinion, it would be nice if batch operations would be continued to implement it. XLibris already implemented batch operations for in certain domains, but I think something like renewing all loans, deleting all requests, something like that, this is definitely also a good use case in my opinion. Well, instead of, for instance, 100 requests to this previous API endpoint, you could just issue one post request to the API endpoint here. Of course, it gives you a low risk of reaching the API threshold, and yeah, it's much faster because you only need to maintain open one HTTP connection. Okay. I also asked myself this question: would I build the app again using the same technology stack? So Cordova, Angular, Ionic. It's a difficult answer, I have to say, because the technology landscape is really changing fast. New options pop up, new frameworks every day. For instance, there's React Native from Facebook, okay, which they promise to allow the same approach, one code base deployed on different platforms. Oops. And my God. And they promise to be much more performant, okay. Also, progressive web apps might be an option. And of course, there's Campus M. So you could also choose to skip the development altogether and, choose Campus M. I have to be completely honest, I haven't found an answer to that. I mean, every approach kind of has its own advantages and disadvantages. And this is where I stand now. That's it. The app has not yet been released because we have to sort out some technical issues still, but we hopefully will release it in this year. That's it. So if you have questions.
Thank you very much, Matthias, for a very thought-provoking discussion, actually. We have time for a question, if anyone's got a question.
Thanks, that was very interesting. Sorry, Eric Hornsby from the University of Queensland. You only mentioned the named user by 1,000, number of thresholds per day.
Yes.
There's also a concurrency threshold of 25 concurrent.
Yes.
Did you not worry about that because you never got anywhere near it, or has anyone ever hit anywhere near that?
Okay, speaking from my background on our context, I don't have any data, to be completely honest. I don't think that this app will reach 24 concurrent requests per second. However, the problem is always not to think about a single application, but to think about all applications you created at this very moment and you will create in the future within your institutions that will use this API gateway. But I don't know. I can't give you an answer from our point of view here.
Anyone ever had 25? 25 concurrent per second, I believe. Josh, didn't you tell us it was like 6 or something? 25 per second.
Just so that everyone knows, it's 25 calls per second, concurrent calls. From a given institution. Any other questions? Yeah.
You mentioned that the e-tags weren't implemented.
Yeah.
Aren't they implemented by the APIs or on your side?
No, I meant by the APIs, basically.
Oh.
But to be completely honest, I would go with webhooks. So if Alma implements webhooks right now, this is, I think, the way to go. It's completely.
Don't you think it will be an overkill for this kind of data where it's not going to change that often, maybe? I mean, you can just reload the page that you would request when the user is changing tabs and if the tags would be implemented, you could just see if they're stale. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know. It's
a design decision, I guess.
Well, also with respect what you ask for with Exlibris, right? So if you ask them to implement e-tags and webhooks, so if I could choose, I would say webhooks. I don't know if they will do both, if it makes sense to do both. I don't even know how difficult it will be to implement webhooks. I mean, Josh showed some use cases. It seemed straightforward, actually. Of course, you need some background knowledge. You need to be a developer. You need some knowledge how it works. But it seems actually quite straightforward. So even if the data doesn't change that much, might be worth an option, in my opinion.
Okay, maybe a recipe kind of presentation next time on webhooks, Josh. We can have one more question if anyone has one last question on this topic. But tea and coffee is also waiting for us, so it's your choice.
We have to leave.
Can we just thank Exlibris for all their contributions today and for being here. And also, also thanks to Xlibris, we have 5 I Love New Primo UI t-shirts. So at the end of today, we will randomize. Unfortunately, we don't have enough gifts, but we'll randomize those and some of the gifts we bought to give to the presenters. Unfortunately, we are not going to give you the choice between a book and a t-shirt. Whatever comes out of the randomizer is yours.
What about books for people who stay under their time limit? Don't take too long.
We have tea and coffee now, so if you want to have it.
Masood, see you next time.
Are you leaving?
Yeah,